Chapter 10 of Mystery at Number 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Mystery at Number 6 by Augusta Huell Seaman. Chapter 10. Ike Massey Becomes a Nuisance. Suffering cats! Do you see that? Exclaimed Sydney under his breath. Of all the people we didn't want to see, he's the worst. I've got all I want out of him. Now he's just going to be troublesome. What shall we do? Demanded Bernice in the same fashion. Bluff it out. Make him think we're just here for fishing, if we can. Just leave him to me. They pretended to be unaware of his presence as long as they dared, but Ike was not easily to be shaken off. "Hey!" he shouted lustily. "What you doing out here again?" "Hello, Ike!" Sydney returned with apparent good nature. "Here you are again. We seem to meet frequently nowadays. Come to try your luck at Number 6? "Will partly. How's fishing today?" "Pretty poor. You see we haven't more than one or two to show for it. Going home now as soon as I can jack up this self-starter." "Been fishing all the time?" demanded Ike, a curious glitter in his eye. Something about his manner warned Sydney that the man had been loitering around unseen longer than they suspected, and he made his answer all the more wary. "Been tinkering with this thing about half the time," he laughed ruefully. As a matter of fact, realizing that he had only set up his rod in a perfunctory way while they were waiting for Delight and had had but the one catch, he did not dare to stretch the time any further. "Well, I was over the other side, down in the cove there, and the biting was fine," remarked Ike, who seemed determined, for some reason, to get him in a hole. In confirmation of his statement, he exhibited a heavy catch lying in his old leather pouch. "Must have been some reason it was better there than here then," answered Sydney, searching his toolbox for pliers. "Plague take this thing. We'll never get back at this rate. Banged the crank up the other day and it won't catch either." All this time Bernice had been standing by, conscious that Ike had a definite purpose in questioning them. She knew that he must have been across the pool, probably concealed by the vegetation that grew close to the edge at that point, long before they had arrived that afternoon, else they must surely have seen his approach. How much had he seen? How much had he heard? What did he surmise? The speculation turned her fairly cold with dismay. She longed to get into the car and fly from the scene, but this was not possible. Meanwhile Ike had devised a new form of torture. "Seen you take a flying trip over to the house there." He pointed to the deserted farmhouse. It had come. Sydney perceived that there was no use of dodging the issue any longer. Ike had probably seen even more than he was going to acknowledge. "Why, surely. I went over to see if that kid was at home. Bernice wanted to see her and talk to her a bit. She's rather scary of old Jerry, is Bernice. That's why she didn't go herself." He did not know whether Ike had discovered for himself that the birds had flown or not. Considering, however, that even if he had not, it would be best in the end to be open about the matter, he went on. "Funny thing, though. The whole outfit seems to have moved out, gone away on a visit or something." "Yeah, I know," acknowledged Ike succinctly. "Found that out myself earlier in the day." Devoutly trusting this would end the matter, Sydney went on with his tinkering in silence. But Ike was by no means satisfied. "You wasn't at all disturbed about their going so sudden like, was you?" he queried, sitting down on a hammock and refilling his pipe. "Disturbed? "Why should we be?" parried Sydney, bending lower over his work to hide the flush of indignation that would surge up over his fair skinned face. As for Bernice, she had turned actually pale under her tan. "Well, I see you runnin' back here, and then the both of you pelted back to the house for all you was worth, and was in and out of it considerable for a spell. 'Peared like you was rather upset somehow." "Of course we were considerably surprised to find them gone," admitted Sydney with as much dignity as he could muster. "I ran back and told my cousin here, and we both went over to the house and tried to see if we could find any trace of them, but we weren't successful." But if he thought this explanation was going to satisfy Ike, he was sadly mistaken. The attack was instantly renewed, from another angle this time. "I warrant you'd give a good deal to know why they plugged out of here so sudden, wouldn't you?" "It's none of my business, that I know of," retorted Sydney stiffly. "Those people have a right to go and come as they please." "Sure, sure," acknowledged Ike, nodding wisely. "I ain't saying they have n't a right. I just remarked you'd mighty well like to know why they lit out." "Well, wouldn't you?" retorted Sydney, turning the tables on him. "Oh, I admit I'm curious about them. I'm always just naturally interested in other folks' affairs, seeing I ain't got any pertickler of my own. But I don't reckon I'm so ill fired wrapped up in this affair as you two seem to be. You sure did hit me as all cut up about this here vanishing of Jerry and his clan." "Well, Bernice has got sort of fond of that girl, and they chum it around a lot while I'm fishing, and altogether we were rather struck all of a heap by her sudden disappearance. It isn't strange." "Didn't strike any clue as to where they'd gone, did you?" demanded Ike, aiming suddenly at a vital spot. And here Sydney was nonplussed. Had Ike seen them when they discovered Delight's signal and hiding place? It was altogether likely, and if he had, was it any use to dissemble and try to throw him off the track? He did not want to tell a direct untruth, and any further evasion seemed impossible now. He was sick and disgusted with the grueling he had been subjected to, and indignant beyond words that they should be so victimized. Moreover, it was growing late, and they should be home now. The self starter was so far repaired that it worked, even though there were further adjustments that ought to be made. A sudden bright idea occurred to him, a way out of the unpleasant dilemma. "How in the world could I have spotted a clue?" he exclaimed testily. "Now then, Bernice, I believe we're all ready. Get in quick as you can. We ought to have been home long ago." Bernice was quick to take the hint and scrambled in without further remark. But Ike was not done with them yet. He leaned across the door of the car in such a way that they could not very well start and continued his third degree of questioning. "Before you go, I'd just like to ask, for reasons of my own, whether you did get any idea where that lot's lit out to. Personally, I think it's the Glades, but I wouldn't put it past Jerry to light on some other choice, now that he's labelled as belonging in the Glades." It was only what Sydney had expected. He did not suppose for a moment that Ike was going to let him off so easily. But he had his scheme well planned. Stepping on the self starter, he replied, "I tell you, Ike, I don't know any more than—" But he got no further, for at this point the car shot suddenly forward into the thicket, hurling Ike unceremoniously out of the way and landing him rather forcibly, head first, into a palmetto clump. On ploughed the car through the thicket and out toward the road, while Bernice held on for dear life and shrieked lustily. Before it had quite landed head on into a pine tree that stood